Hey everyone, it's Lexi. In today's video I'm going to be doing like if you like this then you'll like that. So I actually have like a big kind of mix of kind of genres in here. I have like crime novels, I have historical fiction, some fantasy, and then some mixed smorgasbord things. So without further ado, let's get started. So if you're one of the few people, so this is one book that I'm pretty sure everyone has read, and it is Harry Potter. So if you're a fan of the Harry Potter series and just kind of like the magic and kind of like the friendship and the feel that you get when you read this, I highly recommend that you check out the Dark Witch trilogy. It's the Cousins O'Dwyer trilogy by Nora Roberts. This is kind of more of an adult kind of thing, so if you're a little bit younger, I don't recommend that you read this. But it basically follows the story of a kind of like a family, I guess. So back in like the 13th century, there was this witch named Scotia who sacrificed herself for her children to defeat this one kind of bad like sorcerer. So she passes her powers down to her children, and when she sacrifices herself, she thinks she ends up killing him, but a part of his soul like lives on. So it's part of like the following generations to destroy him. So flash forward to present day, we kind of get introduced to the circle, which is what the three of them are referred to as, or have finally come together, and they're planning to kind of defeat him. And I really like this. It's a very kind of interesting fantasy because it's more adult focused, so we don't see a lot of the tropes that we typically see in YA. So if you're interested in kind of like a fantasy, more like mature one, I highly recommend that you check this one out. It does have a little bit of romance in it, but I think it's okay. Like the overall storyline is just really interesting, and I just love kind of like the feeling I get when I read it. So if you are a fan of like crime novels, like if you've read like The Cuckoo's Calling, if you've read other works by Robert Galbraith, then I highly recommend that you check out the Rizzolian Isles series by Tess Gerritsen. This is by far my favorite kind of medical kind of crime novel thriller series. I really like it. It follows like two female protagonists. One's James Rizzoli, who is a detective, and then Mara Isles is the medical examiner. And it's just they're really creepy books, but they're really well done. Like you can never really guess who actually is like the killer. And Tess Gerritsen was a doctor, so her knowledge on some of the terminology is just spot on. And it's just a really good series. Eventually, like Jane and Mara become friends, and I just highly recommend if you're looking for kind of like a series, I guess, with a strong female friendship and characters, then I highly recommend that you check the series out. So if you are a fan of the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas that really has like a strong female protagonist and kind of like a fantasy and magical element thrown into it, then I highly recommend that you check out the Gemma Doyle trilogy by Libba Bray. This is a book that this trilogy is one that I read in high school, and it's been a long time. I actually really want to reread it. But it basically takes place in Victoria, England, and it's about a girl named Gemma whose mother gets brutally murdered, and she ends up getting sent to this boarding school, and she kind of figures out there that she has like this power and she can transport into another like world, I guess you could say. So it kind of has a paranormal magical element into it, but I really enjoy this series. It has a strong group of female characters and friendships in here as well, which I really like. And so if you haven't checked out this series, I highly recommend that you do. So this one is kind of like World War II genre, so it's like if you like this, you like that, and if you like this, you'll like that. So there's like a bunch of picks that I have in here. So the first one is if you liked All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. So if you liked All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, I highly recommend that you check out The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This was my favorite book of 2015. It's really good. It follows the story of two female protagonists who are sisters who live in Nazi-occupied France during World War II. One sister ends up being like a spy who helps smuggle like fighter pilots back into Spain. And the other sister is a mother who has to open her doors to Nazi officials. And just it kind of takes place And what I really enjoy about this book is that it focuses on kind of like the side of the war, like the female perspective war that we usually typically don't see, and it kind of talks about like the unspoken heroes. So I highly recommend that you check this one out. And if you are a fan of the Nightingale, then I highly recommend that you check out Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wine. This is probably one of my favorite books that I read this year. It's so good. It tells the story of two friends who are in the army during World War II in Britain, and just kind of their different stories. And there are two different stories. So Julie ends up being captured by kind of like the Nazis in France, and she is kind of forced to make her confessions on here, and Maddie is a pilot. So like this kind of has many parallels to The Nightingale, because it does tell the story of women in the war, and I really like this. This is probably one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And if you're a fan of Codename Verity, then I highly recommend that you check out like kind of like, not really the sequel, but kind of like the spin-off to it. It still takes place in the world, and it is Rose Under Fire. It also focuses on the female side of war. Rose is a pilot like Maddie for the British kind of army, and she ends up getting captured and sent to a concentration camp known as Ravensbrück. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it talks about the Rabbits, which were a group of women that had like medical tests like performed on them. So this is really good. It also kind of focuses on female friendship, which I think is good. And like any of these books within like this World War II recommendation, I highly recommend that you check them out. They're really, really good, and they'll stick with you forever. So this next kind of genre I have is like paranormal, like thriller, kind of spooky novels. So if you are a fan of The Diviners by Libba Bray, with like the kind of parallel, freaky, kind of you don't really know what's going on ghost kind of thing, then I highly recommend that you check out The Winter People by Jonathan McMahon. This is a book that I just finished last month, and it was so good. It kind of deals with like a parallel storyline. It kind of follows beginning, we get kind of like the journal entries of a girl named Sarah, which is like in the early 1900s, and we know as the reader that she was brutally murdered. But then flash forward to present day, a girl named Ruthie finds out that her mom is missing, and people in this town in Vermont have been known to disappear in the forest. So she has to kind of figure out like what's going on. There's some paranormal activity going on, but it's really spooky. It's really well done. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. So this last type of recommendation I have is kind of like character based, I guess you could say. So if you're a fan of like the Lunar Chronicles and just kind of like the characters that Marissa Meyer developed and like the friendships, then I highly recommend that you check out the Gallagher Girls series by Ally Carter. This is, even though it's a middle grade series, I really enjoyed it. I read it up until university, because that's when they were coming out, and it follows like a group of friends who go to a spy school and just kind of their friendship. And there's something like not really in this one, but later on in the series you find out that there's something big brewing and they have to be the ones to solve it. And I really like it because a lot of the books in this series focus on the friendships that they have with each other and like their different strengths and weaknesses. And this is definitely a series I want to reread soon. I haven't read it in a long time, I feel like, and they're really quick to get through. So if you're kind of looking for books that are a lot character based, but there's also a substantial plot in here as well, then I highly recommend that you check this series out. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some books you think I need to check out or other recommendations, and if you've read these, what were your thoughts and opinions. So yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.